Hi, folks. In this video, we're going to talk about the fates of all of the characters in the movie. Dostoevsky's view about human nature can really be seen by how the characters end up. Does Dostoevsky condemn the existential position and actions of a certain character, or does he praise them? Do they find salvation, or do they find damnation? This is how we can understand Dostoevsky's view of human nature. So what I want you to do is pause your videos and go through this list and decide which of these characters actually meet with happy endings or sad endings, meet their demise in Dostoevsky's worldview. So pause your videos and see if you can work this out, because you're only going to learn and remember anything if you try to think of it for yourself. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the answers. How about Fyodor? Let's start there. Does he end up with a happy ending? No, he ends up in a coffin. So Dostoevsky is telling us, don't abandon your spiritual side. Don't completely suppress your soul or mind and live for the bodily pleasures, a world of lust and amorality. You can't suppress morality and find a happy ending, according to Dostoevsky. So maybe you didn't see the murder of Fyodor coming. I hope not. But what we can really see is that the novel was talking about the murder of Fyodor the entire time. It was there from the tension between Dmitri and Fyodor was there from the very absolute beginning of the story. So we see two different versions, because of course Dmitri is in many ways so much like Fyodor, but we see him acknowledge morality rather than completely suppress it and wrestling with it. So that's what Dostoevsky wants us to do. You have to hold the two halves of yourself together and in tension, and to try to unify them. Now, what can pull off that sort of unification? I'll talk a little bit more about those details, but it happens for Dmitri. Dmitri, he wants to be born again. And he says, to do that, I must be punished. Without punishment, there is no salvation. This is really Dostoevsky's view, that suffering in the right way, accepting punishment, accepting our sinful nature, not completely repressing morality. That's Fyodor's way of running from sin. He avoids sin by not even acknowledging it, by not even letting morality come into his mind. Dmitri acknowledges he's got that sense of morality and honor, but he also doesn't suppress and eradicate his bodily desires, his insect self. So accept it, and you can be born again. Dmitri does find happiness and salvation by the end. Okay, now how about the next Karamazov brother, Ivan? We talked a little bit about this interesting fact about Ivan. He finds salvation too by the end of the story. He says he acknowledges his evil side, his sinful side. This is what's key to him finding salvation. I'm in the same evil mind as all of you. In the name of Jesus Christ, can't you understand that? He's the character with the biggest turnaround in the movie. This is his finding Jesus moment. He has a couple of other really interesting lines of dialogue that reinforce this. He says, there is one witness. He's inside all of us. That's the devil inside all of us. This is our sinful side, notice. So Ivan the movie is at least consistent to Dostoevsky's vision, because Ivan finds salvation by acknowledging the devil inside of himself. So that is Dostoevskian. Of course, the movie completely ruins Dostoevsky's real vision, though, by having Ivan have this come to God moment. This is completely inconsistent with this character. It's such a Hollywood ending to have Ivan act in this way. We're going to see what really happens to Ivan when you continue in the readings. All right, let's keep going down the list. So in the movie, at least, we've got 2 out of 3 so far Karamazovs have found happiness. Now, Alyosha, of course, also finds happiness. This is him in the final shot of the movie, wishing everybody off. He simple-mindedly, he starts out faithful and happy. He ends the movie faithful and happy. So his character also is very one-dimensional, and we get a one-dimensional view of spirituality from the movie. His fate is completely different in the novel as well. So you really have to pay attention to what happens to Alyosha as you continue the readings. Now, what about Smerdyakov? Well, we already said Smerdyakov ends up in a coffin as well. Here we have the ultimate condemnation from Dostoevsky of Smerdyakov's existential position. Smerdyakov is an amoral one. In many ways, he is like Fyodor, but even worse. He's the one who completely rejects theism and morality. He is the one who is completely devoid of love. Fyodor at least has the love and lust of the body, but Smerdyakov doesn't even have that. He has no nurturing in his life. And this is the thing that is essential for Dostoevsky's vision, is this kind of nurturing sort of love. Now, how about Grushenka? Well, if you know the fate of Dmitri, you must already know the fate of Grushenka. She and Dmitri finally find love for each other. They work out their relationship. Now, we don't get a great sense of how this happens. The scene, remember, is when she runs off to her Polish officer to see if she can rekindle that love. So at that point, up until that point, she is not really accepting Dmitri or the advances of Fyodor. She's pushing both of those men off. And maybe it's the Polish officer, this third man, who is going to be who she ends up with. But that falls apart. He has no hope. He has no salvation. Dmitri swoops in at that exact moment, and they find love for each other. What's interesting is, in my view, the movie doesn't really motivate her finally finding love for Dmitri there. It's like the rejection of the Polish officer finally shows her that Dmitri's who she's meant to be with. But how she is meant to be with Dmitri and why is a key part of the readings that we're going to do in the novel. So we're going to see this worked out in much more detail. So don't forget about this relationship. It's going to be absolutely key to understanding really the grand Dostoevsky's full vision. Okay, let's talk about the next character, Katya. Hers, I think she's the most enigmatic character, the hardest one to read. Her fate is not really spelled out unambiguously in the movie. Dmitri's line about her is supposed to be correct. She does love her own vigil more. When Dmitri, it looks like Ivan speaks the truth and says that Smerdyakov did it. Nobody believes him, but he's about to get Dmitri exonerated, and that's when Katya steps up and reveals the final letter that is the last nail in the coffin and damns him to conviction. So in the end, we see her true side. She does in some ways betray Dmitri, or she wants to make she makes sure that he doesn't get off, which is sort of ironic. She turns out to love her vigil more and not want actually to run off happily ever after with Dmitri. She finally had the chance to do so, or perhaps the possibility of doing so, but she condemns him. So she reveals her true colors, although it's not like she ends up in a coffin like Fyodor and Smerdyakov. So she ends up alone and unhappy. She doesn't have Dmitri. Ivan rejects her when she starts to turn to him as a source, as a possible relationship. So she ends up in this, quasi unhappy state. She's certainly not saved and not living happily ever after. How about Snegiryov and Ilyusha, the father and son? Well, they live happily ever after too. So at the end of the movie, Dmitri is going to run off and be saved. He and Grushenka they're busted out of prison. They're going to run to the border and then be okay. They escape. This is part of their happy ending, is then stopping off at this house first. Dmitri says, I can't leave without making right this relationship with the boy and his father. And he does so. So we do have one happily ever after father-son relationship. Dmitri finally asks forgiveness. So this goes back to that theme. It's all about forgiveness and acknowledging one's need for forgiveness for Dostoevsky. So that's consistent. The boy does forgive him. And then the boy and the father both live happily ever after, just like Dmitri too. Now, I've hinted many ways. The book is way better and not so happy. So it's Dostoevsky gives us something different than this Hollywood rendition of him. So here's your list from the movie. You've seen this already. What I want you to do, keep this list in mind as you really understand what happens by the end of the book, and we're going to revisit some of these characters. Okay, thanks.